The Athletic's Scott Wheeler has published his top 100 drafted prospects list, and he's going to join us at 3 o'clock. Before that, we will wrap up your Mailbag Monday questions on a Tuesday. Join us for CHGO Blackhawks coming up next. Welcome into the CHGO Blackhawks Podcast. Happy Tuesday. I'm Jay Zawoski. That's Mario Tirabassi.
Hello.
Sarah's here as well. We've got a big show coming up for you today. A late ad. Scott Wheeler from The Athletic is going to join us at the top of the hour. For those of you that don't work in radio or television, that means 3 o'clock Chicago time to talk about the several Blackhawks prospects on his top 100 list. Before we do that, we're going to get to your leftover mailbag questions from yesterday. Before we do that, you are going to smash that like button for us. Hit it. Fire it up. Elbow smash it. Give it the, what is John Cena's move called?
The 5-knuckle shuffle?
Yeah, give it that. Do that to it. Whatever it takes, hit that like button, and then give the people's elbow to the subscribe button while you're there as well. And if you're listening on the podcast, you don't have to give your phone any wrestling moves. Those are expensive. Just make sure you're following or subscribed on your favorite app. Leave us a 5-star review.
What else you wanted me to do?
That's pretty good. On Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I like it. I'm ready to go. We're fired up. So
you'll have to go to YouTube and watch that, all you podcast listeners, because I'm now sweaty in this
good job
hot studio, mimicking all those wrestling moves.
It smells fine in here. Don't
it's
worry about it. Just put some of this faux ice down your shirt and you'll be fine.
Good thing I'm wearing Mando.
Yeah, well, we want to thank Scott Wheeler for making time for us last minute. When he joins us, he'll be joining us on the Hooters Hot Wing Hotline, which is a tongue twister, so I want to make sure I say it right when I'm not nervous. Hooters Hot Wing Hotline. That's when Scott will join us at 3 o'clock. But let's get to these mailbag questions quickly so we can get through them before Scott dials in. First one comes from Big Len. Big Len says, big picture, given the Hawks' recent dynasty, shouldn't we expect that even if Bedard puts up elite stats, criticism of him, even by a portion of Hawks fans, even if it's unfair, will continue until he wins a Stanley Cup? I think that is expected. And look, like the reason you do this, the reason you play hockey, the reason you rebuild and build up from scratch is what Kyle Davidson said, is to give you the best chance to win a championship. Mm-hmm. And that's the goal. And Connor McDavid still gets criticism because he's not won a cup yet.
Yeah, and I mean, look at the career of Alex Ovechkin up until the 2018 Stanley Cup victory for the Capitals. Like there was always that asterisk of like, oh, he might be one of the greatest to ever play hockey, but he's never won a Stanley Cup. Like he's going to go down as the Jim Kelly or Dan Marino, like these top tier players that never won anything, and then he did, and then now it's that legacy is different. The air around him became a little bit different, even that late in his career, because he was able to get the Stanley Cup, and especially with Crosby Ovechkin comparisons. Crosby had 3 by that time, and then Ovechkin got his, and yeah, I mean it's definitely something that those elite level franchise changing players are always going to be the focus of, and I don't think it's anything different than it's on a different scale now being in the NHL, but it's something that Bedard has dealt with, his entire development and early career growing up. Through the WHL, there were people that were, kind of down on him as a top of the draft class prospect because, oh, he's too small. Oh, his game doesn't translate to the NHL. Oh, he won't be able to create his own shot and all this stuff. And he's gone out there and put in the work. And I think that's the biggest thing, I think, with guys in Bedard's position, where young players, a lot of attention, a lot of eyes on them, a lot of expectations. What happens when you face those criticisms and when they become very loud, as this has? Do you kind of crumble underneath it? Do you shy away from that spotlight, or do you step up it? And so far, I feel like Bedard, as he's had to answer for it, and as he's talked about it, and as he's then gone out on the ice, he's performed. Like he's still continuing to put up points, still continuing to be, a driver of this team, and he's going to be for a long time. And I think that's something that, you look at his character, and it's just like, when this happens, he's not pouting, he's not complaining, he's not shying away from it. Like, he's stepping up and letting his play speak for itself.
I mean, when he's getting criticism, he's basically saying, yeah, there's things I need to be better at. It'd be one thing if he was really kind of pushing against
standoffish,
and being pouty about it. No, he's not. And he basically says, like, yeah, I know when I'm bad. Don't worry. I know when to make a bad play, and I'm trying to make those happen less frequently. And I think if you go back and look at some of the tape from last year versus this year, you do see some of the same things, but it's far less frequent. It's, maybe it happens now once a game instead of several times a game, or a couple times a week instead of every game. He's improved a lot, and he's only going to get better, especially as help comes along for him. So, I do think he will have scrutiny until he wins, just like everybody. Austin Matthews is going to have it if he doesn't win one. Like we said, McDavid's going to have it until he wins one. That will hang over. You mentioned Jim Kelly and Dan Marino, two great quarterbacks.
Hall of Fame.
And the first thing you think of with both of them is, yeah, but.
Right.
Yeah, but like Dan Marino before Tom Brady had an argument to be, in terms of just quarterbacking, like the best to ever do it, but he never got over that hump. And so he's out of the argument automatically, simply for not having done that. So, and it's not, there's a lot. Charles Barkley lives with that too, never won a championship. So that hangs over great players' heads for a long, long time. And yes, I think it will hang over Bedard until they do it. And let's hope it happens.
Yeah. And I think that's part of the necessity of getting him some extra help, is that not only is that going to help on the ice, it's going to help off the ice too, because you'll have these nationally televised games that involve the Blackhawks on ESPN, TNT, Sportsnet, and they won't only focus on Bedard because he won't be the only player worth watching.
Yeah.
And I think as time moves on, these young guys are going to grow into being more widely known names. And then you add a big fish free agent, you acquire somebody, a big top tier player via trade that's going to help Bedard. That's also going to be an off the ice help as well. It's going to be other people of interest for us to talk to and talk about and write about, and people nationally to also like focus on. And that would mean the team would be better and be winning more. So it won't be all focus on the negativity around this team. It'll be, it'll feel more like the days of yore where the Blackhawks were really good and they were appointment television. Can only hope.
That leads us nicely to our next question from Hawks fan 314. Says, what is the biggest issue facing the Hawks as they try to build a sustained cup contender? I think preventing a culture of losing is a red herring. They need stars. They have one, and they need more. Free agency, trade, or draft, we need to build a legit top six over the next 2 to 3 years. I think you just answered your own question. That is absolutely what they need. We're going to get to the prospects with Scott Wheeler coming up here in about 20 minutes or so. To me, I feel very secure about the bottom six of the Hawks' future. I think that you are going to have, based on the prospects you have, I would even say bottom 9. What I'm not confident is at this precise moment is who will be that running mate with Connor Bedard. We still don't have the answer to that question, and it has to get answered quickly.
Yeah, I mean, they're still building through drafts. This upcoming draft is going to be just as important as the last 3 have been. But yeah, I mean, you need to get someone who can make that immediate impact, and it's nice to see the progressions that a guy like Frank Nazar has made. But is he a full-time running mate with Connor Bedard? Probably not. Oliver Moore, probably going to be a really good third-line center, maybe a middle-of-the-pack second-line center. Same thing with Sasha Boisvert. Like, these forwards that they have seem to be on the path of, important contributors, but not necessarily the guys that are going to drive things forward like Bedard. So, yeah, I think you have – I think that the biggest thing to get them back to cup contention, of course, is the talent factor. The culture of losing, I think as far as the culture of the Blackhawks goes, I wrote about it on ALLCITY or ALLCHGO.com a couple of weeks ago. The guys that they have in the prospect system have had a lot of success amongst their peers and, within the junior ranks, the college ranks. They've had all that success, and I think that group and that core of guys can, lean on that early on in their careers as they get to the professional games, they get to the NHL, and that knowing what it takes to win in those situations, they can then translate that and learn those lessons at the NHL level, and that culture and expectation of winning can grow into what it takes at the NHL level. And so I don't really worry about the culture of losing, as the question said. So it is who's going to make things happen on the ice.
Right.
So I think through the draft they have enough good players. They need a couple great guys, and you get into trades and free agency. Like, again, as we have been saying, this offseason there seems to be some big fish that will be out there, and I think you got to get at least one of them.
At least, and Lebowski 5 and some other people in the chat saying like one is not enough. I tend to agree with that, but you've got to get the one first.
You also can't. You also can't build a Stanley Cup team in 1 year. Like, it's not. Right. It's not feasible.
Right. But I do think it is going to be. I don't think if the Hawks go out and get Mikko Rantanen this summer, or Mitch Marner, whoever your preferred free agent / trade target would be, it doesn't automatically make them contenders. It doesn't always automatically make them even a playoff team. It makes them significantly better, takes a lot of pressure and spotlight off of Connor Bedard. But as a lot of people are pointing out, it was Kane, it was Taves, it was Hossa, it was Sharp.
Yeah. And
even those guys needed a little bit of help along the way. Like, that second line center was always something that needed addressing. And they did a pretty good job of it with Brad Richards and Antoine Vermette and Michael Handzus. Like, over the years, they found guys to fill those roles, but it's never complete. And Bedard and Rantanen is not going to be enough to make you a contender every year. I mean, right. If Rantanen, McKinnon, Makar, Taves, on in Colorado doesn't make them a cup champion every year, Bedard and Rantanen aren't going to do it on their own.
Right.
You know what I mean? So there's a lot more to come, but I think that needs to be the number one priority, is find who that's going to be. And hopefully you're able to sign or trade for one, and then you draft one. And then maybe somebody else works out a little better than you had hopes for in the draft. All right, we got to hit the break zone. Back with the rest of your mailbag questions, and then we'll talk to Scott Wheeler coming up at 3 o'clock on the CHGO Blackhawks podcast. And no matter what your outdoor activities are, it's always important to have the best view. Maybe you, like me, as a middle-aged man, have taken up birding. You like to look at the birds, watch for birds, feed the birds. Well, get yourself a pair of Right-On binoculars. Right-On Optics offers a full range of optics products so you can see clearly. Everybody can use a good pair of binoculars for better views at your kids' sporting events. Again, bird watching. If you got the nosebleed seats somewhere, bring them with you. You'll be able to see the pores on the players' faces from your distant seats. They are awesome. Right-On Optics have been around for over a decade. Every product receives a full quality control inspection, and the Right-On Promise unlimited lifetime warranty not only covers defects, but also accidental damage from drops. So if you're in a tree looking for birds and you drop your Right-On binoculars, they will replace them despite your stupidity. They've got quality products you know you can trust. And if you hold a pair of these binoculars, before you even look in the viewfinder, you can tell it's quality because of the materials it's made with, the weight of the product. You know it's heavy duty, high quality, and you know you can trust it. Check out the full line of Right-On products today at rightonoptics.com/CHGO. That's RITON optics.com/CHGO.
And if you want to add to your bird watching experience with your Right-On Optics binoculars, you might not climb a tree, but you might sit in your backyard in a nice comfy chair and crack open a Sam Adams American Light. It's a new product. Sam Adams American Light beer is getting better with Sam Adams American Light. Crisp, clean, super easy to drink, no gimmicks, no fluff. Sam Adams American Light is not your average light beer. No. It is brewed with 100% American-sourced ingredients from local independent farmers. It's light beer that's made the right way. And when you choose a light beer, you shouldn't be making a compromise. Sometimes when you choose light beer, you're like, okay, it's not going to be as flavorful. It's not going to be as, smooth going down. It's not going to be as enjoyable as a beer. No. With Sam Adams American Light, you are getting a quality beer, quality taste, and it's not going to fill you up. It's not going to bloat you, anything like that. It's going to go down smooth on a nice, chilly winter day where you're hunkered down in 7 inches of snow and freezing temperatures, or if you're poolside on a nice July afternoon, it's going to go down crisp, smooth. It's an American classic, so smooth you'll want to crack open another, because what's better than one beer? 2 beers. It's always Sam's season.
True.
You can grab some Sam Adams American Light, available now at select Chicago retailers. Must be 21 and older, and of course, please drink responsibly. And speaking of Sam Adams American Light, it's time for What's Brewing, presented by, you guessed it, Sam Adams American Light. Speaking of what's brewing, it's NHL trade deadline season. And
what?
Yeah, I know.
We start talking about that.
And even though we got the Four Nations face-off going on right now, which if you forgot, we're going to be doing Team USA post-game shows.
Yeah.
Tomorrow we're going to talk all about the tournament, preview it coming up. But there is no trade freeze. So the trade deadline chatter continues. And what's been interesting is the chatter around Seth Jones. We talked about it yesterday, and it's part of our mailbag. We've talked about it in the last few weeks as his name keeps coming up. But this was interesting coming from Nick Kyprios of Sportsnet. He wrote about it in his Real Kipper. Mel Kiper is the NFL guy.
Right.
Trade Bait 3.0, I believe it's called. Trade Board 3.0. It says, quote, still a long shot trade candidate this season. The most important factor in getting a Seth Jones trade completed is figuring out how much of his contract will be retained by the Blackhawks. It's a lot of money for Chicago to hold on to, but with the news that the salary cap will rise over the next 3 seasons, the burden of retention becomes less significant and could factor into making Jones a more attractive trade asset for the Blackhawks. He goes on to say Chicago doesn't have to worry about money as the trade or the salary cap increases. The Blackhawks already have a lot of salary cap space that they're working with, so Jones's deal is not really hindering them whatsoever, and retaining wouldn't really hinder them all that much. But he notes, again, not a salary dump. It would require the Blackhawks getting a top young asset or 2 for them to make the deal. If Chicago can get off of the contract and another team feels it's getting decent value on a reduced annual average value, AAV, for Jones, it could happen, and Jones could use a fresh start. From everything I've gathered, Chicago has had legitimate talks with the Dallas Stars about Seth Jones. We'll have a better understanding where it leads through the Four Nations face-off.
Jim Nill has wanted Seth Jones for some time, and when Seth Jones was traded to the Hawks from Columbus, Dallas was the other team involved.
Mm-hmm. And
so there was a bit of a bidding war, which is why a lot of people felt like the Hawks overpaid, not only for the trade, but also in the contract. Look, if you're going to get if you're retaining on Seth Jones, I want the return to hurt the team that is. I want the team that makes the trade. I want their fans to be pissed about what they gave up.
Yeah,
like I don't.
It would be nice to be on the other end of that.
If you want to get rid of the salary, and someone wants to take on all $9 million of Seth Jones, $9.5 million for a bag of pucks, fine. I don't love it, but I understand it. You want to just clear the decks for young players and have the salary clear, great. If you're paying half of his deal, you better get something in return that's going to help the team immediately.
Yeah.
And not like, maybe we'll see how it pans out. Like, no, for sure, this guy is going to come and play immediately, and he's under 25, and he's going to make an immediate impact on our team. And I don't know if Dallas is willing to give up those kind of players to get Seth Jones.
The kind of players I would be asking for from the Stars in that case would be Logan Stankoven, Maverick Bork, and their number 3 prospect in their system, according to our guest coming up here, Scott Wheeler, Leon Bichelle.
Yeah. You throw Wyatt Johnston on that list too. Even though it's not going to happen.
1, 2, 3 of your top guys. Yeah. If that's what you feel Seth Jones is worth it for you, that would be worth it to me. So we'll see.
That's it. It's got to hurt. It can't just be, again, traded the $9.5 million for whatever. Fine. If you're eating half that salary, it's got to be something good back.
Yep. Like I said, like it has to be something that is going to impact and improve your team for the better over the course of those 4 years that you're retaining on him, and then in all likelihood beyond that.
Would you?
Maybe.
Been a bit of a down year for Jason Robertson. Does that interest you at all?
I mean, yeah, but I'd
25.
Yeah, that would
make $7.7 million.
Now, if you're retaining, then you're adding money.
He's got 51 points in 55 games this year.
Yeah, I'm not saying no to Jason Robertson. I don't think Dallas deals him, but I'm not saying no.
I don't either. But if they're looking at the Borks and the Johnstons and these guys coming up on a contract, they might think they've got his replacement. I don't know. We'll see.
Maybe.
Stay tuned. March 7th.
Yep.
We'll be here.
Counting down.
All right, let's get these questions in before Scott joins us here momentarily. Timothy, I don't know how to say this. I'm just going to say Timothy.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I would say the Americanization is Timothy.
Okay. We'll just call him Yurko. Or T-Yurk. Who out of the UFAs and RFAs besides Donato would you extend? Martinez, Maroon, and Smith are all out of contract, or would you keep some of them? Soderblom, Kaiser, Kurashev are RFAs. What should Kyle do with them?
RFAs, I'm bringing back Kaiser and Soderblom. I don't think that's too controversial. Kurashev,
You'd probably get him for a song.
Kurashev, I think...
Two-way deal.
I think he is in the way. He has been leapfrogged by some of these guys that are going to be coming in.
Yeah.
As far as, the plans for the future. So, yeah, I mean, if you want to do a much cheaper, if you want to take him on a big pay cut, if he's going to do that and he wants to do that, like, I don't think he would, but go test the market, get a different opportunity elsewhere. I think that's fine. I'm definitely fine moving on from him, knowing what's coming behind him. UFAs, I mean,
currently, just for the record, $2.25 million right now for Kurashev. Yeah. RFA at the end of this year. No. Less money, two-way deal. We can talk, maybe.
Yeah, no. I mean, the UFA guys, the guy that I'm bringing back, if he's not traded by March 7th, is Ryan Donato for sure. I think there's a case to not trade him, not even have him on the trade board. But I still think there's an opportunity out there for the Blackhawks to strike while the iron is hottest on him to get, maybe get an overpayment from a team. If they miss out on their big fish at the trade deadline, then maybe Donato is a lot of teams' plan Bs, and they start to overpay for him as it gets down to crunch time. There could be an opportunity for that with, the Blackhawks to take advantage of that. But if Ryan Donato is in the lineup, I think they play March 7th. I'm pretty sure that night.
I believe that's right.
If he's in that lineup, I really hope that there's a new contract in his locker when he gets to the United Center that night and for him to sign. Because if you don't trade him, I don't want him getting to, open market free agency, because there's going to be teams out there that'll probably want to capitalize on a guy having a big year and maybe hitting his stride. The Blackhawks have the first opportunity to negotiate with him beyond March 7th if he's still on the team, obviously. And you can extend him at maybe less than he'd get on the open market. And if that's something he wants to do, if that's something the team wants to do, I think you take advantage of that.
I am not bringing back any of the Maroon, Smith, or Martinez players. No problem with any of the three of them. I think they've all come here and done what they've been expected to do. Mm-hmm. Martinez, I think, would wish to be a little bit healthier, but it's kind of what we all expected. No, none of them. Kaiser, Soderblom, yes, and I'm very much on record about bringing Ryan Donato back. All right, got a couple super chats we want to get to as well here. Try to get through these quickly. Michael Evans, $5 says, what would be a good contract offer for a guy like Brock Besser? Currently makes $6.5. Is $9 million too much, and how long of a deal?
$9 million for Brock Besser would
that
be
feels like probably what he's going to get as a free agent. It might feel a little bit rich, but with the cap going up and you're looking at like Rantanen guys like, and Marner like getting like $14 million.
Yeah.
Like these salaries are going to make big jumps that last summer looked crazy. This summer are going to look a little more normal.
Yeah.
Because it's about the percentage of the cap.
I know.
That's a big thing for these guys.
Yeah. I don't see Besser being a guy that's that high. I would say he could be the highest forward on the team up until Bedard signs. But I wouldn't do $9 million. I
think that's the max I would do.
If I'm getting Brock Besser, I would say like 6 years, $8 million.
Career high for him was last year, 73 points in 81 games, 40 goals, 33 assists. This year's got 35 points in 48 games. He's never been close to a point per game player aside from last year, which seems to be an outlier. He is 27 years old, so theoretically be entering his prime.
Be in his prime right now.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I would say 6 years on that. Get him into his early mid 30s, and hopefully you're contending for playoffs by then.
Yeah,
I think that would be what I would do.
And let's do one more real quick from Warren Bedard's $5 with Nick Kiprios' trade board. If Carolina trades Rantanen again because of contract issues, could the Hawks get a deal done with them?
That was something in the piece. He said that if Carolina doesn't get a contract done by the trade deadline, they would trade him again. That would be wild. That would be wild to me for Carolina to give up what they gave up just to flip him again. That would be wild. I don't know if the Hawks would be in on it though.
If it becomes available, find a way.
He's already on the books.
But I can't imagine that Carolina's if they're gonna trade him again, they're gonna want to add a player that helps them now, and I don't know who that is from the Hawks, especially with now Jason Dickinson banged up.
Rantanen for Donato, 1-for-1.
The deal is 1-for-1. All right, we got to hit the break zone. After that, we will welcome Scott Wheeler from The Athletic to the show on CHGO Blackhawks.
And hey, are you in the market for a new car? Well, you might want to head down to the auto show, check out some new cars, and then head to our friends at Ray Chevy to get auto show deals going on right now at their location in Fox Lake. That means the latest vehicles you've been looking for are now priced with huge auto show savings, like $11,000 off MSRP on new Chevy models, or you can check out their selection of over 125 vehicles priced under $20,000. With one of Chicagoland's largest Chevy inventories, you're sure to find the perfect vehicle for you. And as one of the top selling Chevy dealers in the Midwest, they're able to keep their prices competitive, so you know you're getting a great deal. Plus, Ray's Price Promise lets you shop confidently because they guarantee no add-ons, no hidden fees, and no gimmicks, which means the prices you see and hear about right now are the prices you pay. You don't have to worry about price changing, any stressful negotiations, or any tricks. No tricks at Ray Chevy.
Never.
The people at Ray Chevrolet just want to help you get into the right vehicle at the right price. Go see for yourself. Visit our partners this February for their convenient location on Route 12 in Fox Lake, and don't miss out on their auto show sales event going on all month long. Be the star of the show by shopping Ray Chevy in Fox Lake or at raychevrolet.com. They're serving the community. They've been serving the community since 1963. Together, let's drive.
And All-Star Weekend is almost here, and Prize Picks is the best place to win cash. Watching your favorite players during the game and the Saturday night events, like the 3-point contest. You can now win up to 1,000 times your money on Prize Picks.
That's a lot.
That is a lot. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in more than 30 states, including California, Texas, Georgia, and Florida. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. Join over 10 million users and sign up today. We love doing the daily fantasy on Prize Picks.
Love Prize Picks.
More than, less than. It's very simple. I don't have to understand plus, minus, all this crazy stuff. Yeah. Is it more Connor Bedard shots or less than 3? I know what that means. Give it to me. Download the app today and use the code CHGO to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today. Use code CHGO to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. And now we go out to the Hooters Hot Wing Hotline and welcome our guest, Scott Wheeler of The Athletic. Scott, thank you for taking time, especially on such short notice, on what I assume was a very busy day for you.
Yeah, busy day, but to finally have one of the biggest projects that I do every year out in the world, it feels good. This has been a real grind to get to this point. I'm not trying to pat myself on the back here, but I've literally worked every single day since before Christmas here. It's been 50 plus days to put together the 32 prospect pool rankings, and then sort of this at the end of the 32 prospect pool rankings is this final project, which is the top 100 drafted prospects. So it's been a grind here over the last month and a half. Haven't seen a lot of my wife and kids, and now it's time to sort of get back to some storytelling and turn my attention fully towards the 2025 NHL draft in a few months here.
Well, this is awesome. Before we get into the Blackhawks on the list, why don't you talk to people about your process? What are some of the tools you use to make this list? Maybe some of the reasons some guys got excluded or included.
Yeah, so the 32 pool rankings process, which leads into this final top 100 league-wide list, really starts in November. I put together a schedule with my editor in November. I put together all loose sort of lists, loose top 15 lists for all 32 teams in November. And then I begin to update my reports and build out my reports and sort of put it together through December and January and then into February. So it's obviously there's the World Juniors wedged in there. So I've got some travel that I have to manage in there. I went this year to Plymouth for the Chipotle All-American game and to Brantford for the OHL Top Prospects game in there as well. So trying to navigate the travel and put together the 32 pool rankings. And then right before I publish each of the 32 pool rankings, I'll typically send the list to a scout from that organization and just sort of say, hey, is there anything here that looks off? As part of that process, I'm speaking to their coaches in the OHL, QMJHL, WHL, NCAA, their coaches in Europe. I'm speaking to their general managers if they're with a junior club. I'm speaking to their skills coaches, their strength and conditioning coaches, trying to get as clear a picture of all of these kids as I can. And then the final list, it's just about sort of putting them into buckets to start. So I put them into 5 or 6 tiers. The top 100 is divided into usually 5 or 6 tiers. And then once I've got those buckets and I feel good about the divides within the buckets, then it's about pulling your hair and trying to figure out an actual order. So a complicated process for the Blackhawks, one that they seem to have a bigger piece of more and more. This top 100 seems to have a larger quantity of Blackhawks prospects every year. And then even I'm sure we'll get to it, but there's 2 or 3 Blackhawks prospects that weren't in the top 100 that I think belong in it, right? So then you've got you've eventually got to cut it off. I cut it off at 100, but there were about 35, 40 players outside of that top 100 who I thought were comparable prospects to the guys in the 90s. So you're really talking about 140 prospects for a list that's 100 deep.
I think the first guy is because you mentioned that the first guy that I noticed wasn't on your list that I imagine is probably in that 35 to 40 player range is Roman Kantsarov. He's a guy that's gotten a lot of attention from the Blackhawks fan base and what he's been doing in the KHL, specifically comparative to Ivan Demidov. What's your read on him? Because he was outside of the top 100.
Yeah, so I really think that the Blackhawks pool divides into a few tiers. You've got Artie right at the top. I think you've got Frank and Korchinski right below him. I think you've got below that, you've got another divide into Sam Renzel. And then after, I think Renzel has played himself sort of elevated above that 4th group. And then there's a 4th group that I sort of had at the back end of this top 100. And I think that's Oliver Moore, that's Sasha Boisvert, that's Nick Lardis, that's Roman Kantsarov, that's Marek Vanacker. And Vanacker and Kantsarov were 2 players that they weren't just in that 40 players that I talked about. They were in like that next 10. So they were really close. I had Lardis in the 90s on my list, and he was the 7th Blackhawk on my list, which was the most of any team in the NHL. But I mean, Lardis, Vanacker, Kantsarov, you could make a case for any one of those guys. If someone came to me and said, I think you should have had Roman Kantsarov on this list over Nick Lardis, I wouldn't really argue with them. Kantsarov's had an excellent year. Lardis has also had an excellent year. Lardis, we're talking about the current leader in the CHL in goals. has played at a goal per game all season, just keeps filling the net, is prolific on the power play on the flank with his one-timer, is a really strong skater, which is a theme within the Blackhawks pool. They've clearly up front prioritized speed. Kantsarov is also a strong skater. Obviously, Oliver Moore and Frank Nazar are elite skaters. It's actually funny. Connor Bedard might be one of the weaker skaters of their young forwards, right? Ryan Green, who's not on the list, is an excellent skater as well and fits into that group of 40. So there's a lot coming. Kantsarov in particular, to answer your question, excellent year. Like, there's no question. He's been prolific in the KHL. He's fast, he can score, he can make plays for himself. He gets off the wall into the interior guts of the ice. He can score at 5-on-5. He's a threat on the power play. There's a lot to like about Roman Kantsarov. I do just wonder long-term how many 5'9", 5'10", 5'11" speedy wingers the Blackhawks can have, and which of those guys is going to sort of rise above the herd and make it. You've already got, obviously, Bedard and Nazar who fit into that. Obviously, Bedard's a natural center. Nazar was a center growing up, but I think Frank will be a winger in the NHL. I saw someone there said, Savoy is a great and awesome skater too. Yeah, so is Paul Ludwinski, and you go down the list. Kantsarov, I just don't know where he'll fit. Like, there's probably only going to be one or two roles in the NHL for Kantsarov, for Lardis, for Moore, eventually they're going to spend money on free agents. They're going to try to beef up that top 9 forward group with legit established NHL players. And then it's going to be a tricky situation trying to elevate the young kids when they're ready and give them all opportunities and have them all work out. I think some of those kids will eventually likely get traded. We always see the same sort of cycle over the years. The LA Kings for years acquired. And there are actually very few of those prospects that the Kings drafted in the sort of mid 2010s who are still members of the LA Kings. It's Quinton Byfield, it's Brant Clark, but a lot of those guys have moved on. Brock Faber was traded, right? So you go down the list. Not all of these players are going to make it. You're not going to have 12 under 25, under 26 forwards in the NHL. But it's a good problem to have. And then they do have a little bit more size. Like Colton Dach has size. Sacha Boisvert has size. So they're not all the little speedy types. There is going to be some sort of size in that group as well. But I do wonder, like, I think Lardis and Kantsarov are probably fighting for one future job with the Blackhawks, and the other is probably a high-end AHL scorer, or maybe he gets dealt and goes and plays in the NHL somewhere else. I think that's kind of where they fit.
All right, let's get to the 7 Hawks you do have on your list. We'll start at the top with Artem Levshinov. And ahead of this draft, there was a large contingent of Demidov over Levshinov people. I think it was probably, at least 60-40, probably a little higher towards Demidov. So every time Demidov does anything, anywhere, we hear about how Kyle Davidson blew the draft. Is there anything you could do to ease the minds that Artem Levshinov, your number 3 prospect in the world, is going to be okay and work out for the Blackhawks?
Yeah, I'm not worried about Artie at all. Now, I had Demidov number 2 on my list at the end of the year, but it is worth saying that if you go back through I do 7 draft rankings each year. If you go back through my 7 draft rankings last year, I think Levshinov was 2 on 5 of them and Demidov was 2 on 2 of them. So Levshinov actually spent more of last year in their draft year ahead of Demidov on my list than Demidov did, even though Demidov finished at number 2 and I have Demidov at number 1 on this list. So we're talking regardless about a very, very high-end prospect. I think people look at the counting stats in the AHL with Artie this year and just assume that he's not having a great year, plus the healthy scratch for being late for a meeting. And there are just some sort of things that have popped up and you go, oh, maybe he's struggling or he's not coming along. From every conversation I've had with those within the Blackhawks organization, they are thrilled with where Artie's at. We're still talking about a teenage defenseman who's playing 25 minutes a night often in the AHL, and who's contributing in all situations, and the points are starting to come, and a kid who just a couple of years ago was playing in Belarus, for heaven's sake. Like, the progression of Artie Levshinov from Belarus to the USHL to MSU to the AHL this year has been extremely quick. I think he's still learning the game in a lot of ways in real time, But ultimately, we're still talking about a freak athlete, an excellent skater. You see him in real life and you're immediately struck by his presence. He's just a physical specimen. He's jacked. And on the ice, that looks like a game that is up and down the ice in transition. It's active off the blue line. He makes plays. He makes stops. He's physical. He knocks guys over. He wins battles. Really, the only thing that Artie needs to do in order to develop into a first pair defenseman in the NHL is sort of work on the reads and the decision making and knowing when to use his skill and when to make a simpler play and his timing on closeouts and making sure that he's not getting burned. But from a natural talent perspective, in terms of not just offensive talent, but the physical tools, Artie has it all. And I still believe that Artie is going to be if not a true number one, then he's going to be an excellent number two. I think he's got a chance to put up 50 points in the NHL and run your first power play and be a real presence defensively and physical and big and strong. And there's a lot to like about Artie. Now, the challenge is that he's always going to be compared to Ivan Demidov, who is a player that I think has 90 to 100 point upside if he hits in the NHL and is potentially going to be the best player on another original six franchise in the league, right? Like I think Demidov has a chance to be better than Nick Suzuki and Juraj Slafkovsky and Cole Caulfield and Lane Hudson. Like I think he has a chance to be the best player on that Montreal Canadiens team. So is Artie ever going to be the best player on a Chicago Blackhawks team that has Connor Bedard on it? No. But could Artie be a first pairing guy and a big part of a successful team? I think absolutely.
Well, that's great. I love hearing that.
Yeah.
that is a breath of fresh air coming from someone like you, Scott, who has eyes on all these guys as much as anybody.
And it's worth noting, you guys know this already, but they were very close to picking Demidov. So it's not like the Blackhawks scouts saw Demidov and didn't like him, or he wasn't in the mix and they ruled him out. Like it was down to the wire for them, and it was an internal debate for them. So I don't think they missed on Demidov. It's not like they didn't understand how good Demidov is. I think they fully understood and loved Ivan Demidov. In fact, I know that they loved Ivan Demidov. So they just ultimately decided to go with the D, and I think both are going to be studs in the NHL.
Do you think that decision to take Levshinov over Demidov had anything to do with this year's draft, where they weren't expecting to probably pick first overall, even though they very well might this year because they underachieved a little bit, and they saw forward heavy Misa, Hagens, etc. coming out? Do you think they were maybe saying, hey, we got a pretty good chance here. This Levshinov's a different level of defenseman that we don't have in the system yet. Let's take him here and then know we're going to get one of these really solid forwards in the 2025 draft. You think that could have been part of the mindset?
Yeah, I think that was a part of the calculus for a lot of teams last year, frankly. It wasn't a coincidence that, forget Artie. There was Steve Boyum, there was Sam Dickinson, there was Zane Parekh, there was Anton Salayev, there was Carter Yakimchuk. We're talking about 6 high-end D prospects in last year's draft. Now, Matthew Schaefer in this class fits into that same category. But if you were to rank the top 7 D from last year's draft and this year's draft, it's 6D from 2024 and Matthew Schaefer, right? So the second best D available in this draft is nowhere near those 6 guys. I love Radim Murtka. I like Jackson Smith. I like Kashan Aitchison. I've got time for Logan Hensler. There are other good D prospects in this year's draft, but they aren't the premium D prospects that Artie was outside of Matthew Schaefer. So I'm sure that they considered that the top 5 in this draft was likely to be that they were likely to pick in the top 5 again, and that the top 5 in this draft was likely to be 1 defenseman and 4 forwards, and it was the reverse last year almost. So I would be surprised if they didn't consider that.
Well, while we're on the topic, in the 2025 class, let's say the Blackhawks do end up with the number 1 pick, and Matthew Schaefer, I think, has moved his way into being that consensus number 1. What do you do? Because you just took Levshinov last year. You didn't come away with that top end forward that I think a lot of people expect that the Blackhawks need to pair with Connor Bedard to kind of help push him and the organization forward. If they're number 1, do they go with Schaefer and figure it out again, or is there a way that you can take a guy like James Hagens or Michael Misa at number 1 and leave Schaefer on the board?
Well, I think there is an argument to be made for James Hagens or Misa at number one, but I think increasingly that the consensus favors Matthew Schaefer. I think he's emerged as the clear-cut number one guy in this draft class. Absolutely, you could justify taking Hagens or Misa there. If I'm the Blackhawks, though, I might be tempted to just, and Blackhawks fans will hate me hearing this because I know how badly they want a running mate for Connor Bedard. But I would maybe just be tempted to take Schaefer and figure the rest out. And maybe that means you immediately look to move Sam Rinzel or Kevin Korchinski, or maybe you move both Sam Rinzel and Kevin Korchinski, right? Like maybe you look to readjust. We've talked a lot about Rinzel and Korchinski and Lev Shunov, but they also have Ethan Del Mastro, who looks like a player, and Nolan Allen, who looks like a piece of the puzzle. And Crevier has surprised some people this year. And now those guys are depth, bottom of the totem pole, like 5-6 types on a contending team, I think. But in saying that, there are other pieces there. There's an abundance of young D within the organization right now. And Schaefer's a special player. Like, I think we're talking about Miro Heiskanen here. Like, we're talking about a complete game changer, a number one D, a two-way transition monster. That's a hard thing to pass up. And the idea of Schaefer and Artie as your 1-2 for the next 10 years is an extremely hard thing to pass up. Maybe it means you go and you spend 12, 13, 14 million dollars on Mikko Rantanen or Kirill Kaprizov in the next couple of years in order to get that player for Connor Bedard because you've prioritized D with your last two premium picks. But I don't think just because you don't have that guy for Bedard right now means that you have to take Misa or Hagens necessarily.
All right, let's go down the list of the other guys you have on yours, Scott. You got Nazar at 27. We've gotten a good look at Frank Nazar. I think it sent a message at the Four Nations break that Nazar was not sent to Rockford. I think they look at him as an NHL player. I don't think unless something very unexpected goes wrong in his game, it looks like he's a Blackhawk from here on out, and he's, save for moments here and there, he's been pretty impressive. The only thing that's missing is the production. He's hit a lot of posts, shot it wide a few times, but he has a difference-making play or two every game.
Yeah, I mean, me and my colleague Corey Pronman have had lots of debates about Frank over the years. We sort of landed on, and frankly, Corey's not alone in that. So that's not me like throwing Corey under the bus. There are plenty of NHL scouts and people from around hockey, college hockey, the NTDP. There were people who weren't really sure what Frank would be in the NHL, and they weren't sure whether he was a center or whether he was a winger. They weren't sure how dynamic he would be offensively, despite being very talented and despite being an excellent skater as a 5'9" player. What does that look like in the NHL? And there were all sorts of real questions about Frank. I've always fell in the camp that with the combination of his skating and his feel on the puck and his elusiveness and the way that he has learned to use his skating, I always felt that it would work. When he was at the NTDP, one of the big problems he had, especially in his U17 year at the NTDP, was and I spoke with their coaching staff about this over the years, but he was always getting ahead of the play, and he was always just speed. And I think what has helped Frank adjust his game, especially since coming back from the injuries that he did in college, what has helped Frank adjust has just sort of picking and choosing when he's using that speed, not cheating for his offense. I still think there's always going to be a little bit of that. Like you sort of want him cheating up ice at times and looking to attack off the rush and that kind of a thing. You want him trying to make plays, even if it comes with the odd turnover at the offensive zone blue line. But he also works hard enough, I think. I think he's competitive enough. And as a result, I've always believed in him as sort of a second-line guy. I don't think Frank, in the future Blackhawks team that's back in a contending window, I don't think Frank's playing on a first line. But could Frank be a sort of productive power play second-line center or second-line winger in the NHL and have a really nice career? I think absolutely. With the way he skates, the way he handles the puck, the way he passes the puck, I think it's going to work for him and click for him eventually. Now it's just about, similar to Artie, it's about learning when to use his skills, and sort of the know-how on the ice, because I think sometimes he's just out there trying to make things happen and gets himself in a little bit of trouble, and can sort of pull himself out of games at times just by pulling himself to the perimeter and that kind of a thing. But he's got the talent, he's got the skating, he's a good kid. Like I think he's gonna figure it out, and I've always been a believer.
One of the guys on your list that I think a lot of people see is pretty close to Frank Nazar, and kind of in that similar mold of like fast, but don't really know exactly a center or a wing, second line, third line, all that, that I think Blackhawks fans are kind of starting to get a little, two-sided on is Oliver Moore. You had him 64 out of your top 100. What have you seen from him in his second year at Minnesota, where his production hasn't really taken that step on the score sheet, but has his game kind of continued in that development path from, using his speed and all that?
It's been a tricky evaluation period over the last year and a half for Oliver, because he had an excellent first college game. I think he had like a hat trick in his first exhibition game. It didn't count on his stats for his freshman year, but I believe he had a hat trick not this previous September, but the September prior, when he arrived at Minnesota. He had a hat trick and he looked good, and he was so fast. And he's a dog, and he works hard, and he's strong for a 5'10" and a half kid over pucks, and competitive, and he plays in the middle, and he can play center, and he can penalty kill, and there's a lot to like about Moore. But the question that has kind of followed him is, where's the finishing? Like, where's at the end of all of the plays that he makes, and all of the sort of not just effort plays that he makes, but skill plays that he makes? He's got some skill. It's that last piece of execution has always been tough. He just doesn't seem to beat goalies on that finishing play. He gets so many chances in tight and partial breakaways, and has just never scored quite enough. So that's when you start to wonder, okay, is this kid more of a third line guy than a second line guy? And I think that's where you have to land at this point on Moore. Until he shows you that he can produce more, I think you're hoping that he'll be an excellent third line speed guy. And I think he fits as a centerman more than Frank does, because he's just got that motor. He's just a dog. He just works. And not that Frank is lazy by any means. I think Frank's got some PK value, and Frank, with his skating, can apply pressure off the puck. But Oliver is a completely different animal. Like, he's just got, the engine is always revved with Oliver. So really just waiting for him to pop more in terms of actual scoring. I wonder whether he'll get more of an opportunity to do that next year if he returns to college. They're going to graduate Jimmy Snuggerud and a couple of others at Minnesota. But he's an awesome player. He's a coach's favorite. He can play in all situations. He can play late in games. He can play on the PK. And if he can become a 40-point third-line NHL center who's one of the fastest players in the league, which I think he will be, I think Oliver Moore is one of the 10 or 15 best skaters on the planet. If he can become that, I think that's a really valuable player. Now, I also think Sasha Boisvert fits in as a third-line center. So, again, you get into a similar situation as with Lardis and Kanserov. Maybe only one of those guys is in that role, and maybe only one of Oliver Moore and Sasha Boisvert is in that role, or maybe Moore moves to the wing so that he can play with Sasha Boisvert on a future third line. Those are the competitions that are going to happen internally.
All right, well, you've been super generous with your time. We probably got time for one more question, and since you're the guest on the Hooters Hot Wing Hotline, we're going to give you the choice of Lardis, Rinzel, or Korchinski. Who are you most excited to talk about, and tell us why?
Rinzel, just because of what he's accomplished and how far he's come in the last year and a half. Rinzel was a very, very raw player entering college. He is now one of the best defensemen in college hockey. And even a year ago, entering the World Juniors in Gothenburg, there were questions of, is he ready for that level? Does he have the brain to make decisions at that pace? And I thought from that point on, first of all, I thought Rinzel was a pleasant surprise in last year's World Juniors with the way that he played for USA to help them to their first of 2 back-to-back gold medals. And then really through the second half of last season at Minnesota, and certainly into this year at Minnesota, he has just sort of really hit his stride. Big 6'4" defenseman. I have Korchinski ahead of him still, but I had someone message me that they thought that Rinzel was actually a better prospect at this stage than Korchinski is. Wow. I think Sam has turned a lot of people into believers. The talent and the mobility and the length has always been there. And it was just about him filling out his frame. He's now a big, strong kid. It was about him learning the game and the decision-making process and playing against higher level competition after a pretty unconventional pre-draft sort of path, if you will. But Sam looks like a legit prospect now. And if I'm some of those other guys that I mentioned, if I'm Ethan Del Mastro or Nolan Allen or Crevier or Wyatt Kai, I know Wyatt Kaiser's now kind of outside of the fold here, but if you're one of those guys, you look at Artie and you say, yeah, I can live with being behind that guy. You look at Korchinski and say, yeah, I can live with being behind that guy. But I think in the hierarchy of what is ahead for the Blackhawks, I think all of those guys are now also behind Rinzel in the pecking order potentially. So again, it's going to be a healthy competition amongst those young D, but I think Rinzel looks like a stud at this point.
All right, Scott, thank you so much for your time. I encourage everyone to head over to The Athletic and check out Scott's top 100 prospect list. For yourselves, we don't want to give the entire content away, especially considering all the work that goes into it. So, Scott, we appreciate the work. We appreciate the time, and hopefully we'll catch up soon before the draft, at least for sure.
Yep. Thanks, guys. Cheers.
All right.
Thanks,
take care.
Scott.
That is Scott Wheeler of The Athletic. Again, head over to The Athletic, and for basically the cost of a cup of coffee a month, you get some of the best hockey coverage around, including their prospect work is unrivaled.
Scott's
so
awesome.
Yeah, definitely check it out. So much good stuff, and every player on that list, 1 through 100, has a nice little bio written about them, the thought process. It's wonderful. So make sure you get to it. And again, we are very close to 100 likes. We've got 300 people watching. Let's get over that 100 like hump, please. That would be nice. Great.
Yeah, a lot of great stuff in there from Scott. Again, really appreciate his time and his insight. And yeah, I mean, again, you kind of got to go back to the people who are watching these guys the most, that digging in the most, as he said when he first joined us. The amount of people around these players that have impacts on their games, the strength and conditioning coaches, all that stuff. Like guys like Scott, like they dig in and they get those those insights to those players on top of watching them and breaking down film and everything. So to get the insight from him is awesome. I think he's got a one of the best insights out there, and to hear what he had to say about guys like, Kanserov and Lardis, at quote unquote the bottom of this list, and how highly he still spoke of them. Like, it really just kind of, again, puts in perspective, like, where the Blackhawks are in their rebuilding process as far as draft picks go. Yeah. Like, they're doing it the best right now out of the league. They had the most guys on this list. You look up and down, they have one of the top prospect pools across the board. It is now getting to that point where those players are stepping into the pro hockey game, and they're starting to get here. So as more of those guys show up, the better everything's going to feel. Yeah, and I think it's important too, because there's a lot of people, as we talk about adding the free agent or whatever it's going to be, sort of saying like, well, what's going to attract people here? Why, like, the Hawks are a losing team right now. The appeal of Connor Bedard is not enough to draw people here, and like, players are aware of what the Hawks are doing. Like, they might say they're not. They might say they don't read this stuff. They read this stuff. They want to see if their teammates are on a top 100 list or not, so they can bust their chops about it. Like, if you got a guy signing a multi-year deal, he's going to want to know, like, what's the plan for the multi-years.
Exactly. And they're going to know, hey, if they're coming to talk to, I mean, look, Jake Gensel was brought up and said, look, Jake Gensel chose Tampa, so it clearly indicates that no one wants to come here. That's one guy. Mm-hmm. You don't know the circumstances of I don't know his family circumstances or anything like that. Whatever. Right.
But that's also one guy cashing in on his last big opportunity to contend and compete and get paid.
Right.
So I think as you go through the years, these free agent classes are going to see the Blackhawks going on an upward trajectory, and you can get those guys that are saying, like, that's a team that's going to contend while I'm there. I want to be part of it.
Yeah. And the other thing, we mention this every now and again, but I think it makes sense to mention often, is that there's more to signing a life-changing long-term contract than what is their current place in the standings. Guys look at quality of life, schooling for their kids, hockey opportunities for their kids, neighborhoods to live in, things to do in the offseason, resources that the team provides. And the Hawks are at or near the top in terms of nutrition, facilities, all the things that players rely on to be their best.
Yeah.
The Hawks provide that as well as any team in hockey, and maybe the best of any team in hockey. So and there is still an aura to pulling that jersey over yourself. Putting on that Blackhawks jersey means something. Playing in the original six means something to guys. Like, let's zoom out of it and look at the Montreal Canadiens, who are in a similar situation, right? As the Hawks they're on their way up. They're a little bit ahead of schedule of the Hawks, but you don't think a free agent looks at Montreal right now and says, hey, in 2-3 years, that's going to be something, and it's going to be in Montreal.
Right.
If I win a Stanley Cup for Montreal, I'm never buying a drink or a meal for myself ever again. Same thing in Chicago. You think Dave Bolin has paid for a drink in Chicago in the last 10 years? I guarantee you not, as long as he says, hey, that guy, that's me. That's me holding the cup. Yeah. That's me throwing my gloves off after 17 seconds. Like, it's just, that stuff is all weighed into it. So it's not, they don't go sit down, June 30, or 30 days in June or 31? 30 days. On June 30th and go, all right, let's see, I got to make my decision here. Standings. Okay, let's see. Well, Vancouver finished higher than Chicago, so I'm going to Vancouver.
Right.
It's just, that's not how it works. So trust me, the Hawks have, and if you don't believe in that and you want to be the world's biggest cynic, the Hawks have a butt ton of money to spend.
Yeah.
And they're willing to spend it. So these players know that too.
Yep.
One more super chat we got to get to from Max. He says, the future is very bright, Hawks fans. Give it time. And yeah, I just, I think sometimes when you hear us getting frustrated on shows or post-game shows with the disconnect that, like, they got to fire Davidson, he doesn't know what he's doing. And then things like this are constantly published showing you how well it is going organizationally. And the only team with 7 prospects in the top 100, and basically what he said was, 10 prospects in the top 110?
Basically, yeah.
It's pretty good. You got to feel pretty good about that. Again, none of them are 100% certainty, but you got to figure 4 or 5 of those 7 to 10 are going to pop.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
if you hit on half these guys, you are on a good path to a quality roster that you then piece in with trades and free agents.
And Reven chimes in and says, you guys are right. The Hawks have pulled a serious free agent while they were bad. They signed Teuvo Teravainen and Tyler Bertuzzi, who were 2 of the top 10 free agents available. You might not love those signings. Everyone seemed pretty much on board when they made them.
Yeah.
So yeah, they have signed, and it wasn't the time to sign a massive free agent. They did try with Gensel. He chose Tampa, but they're showing a willingness. So I don't know. I just think it's a weird thing to be upset about. If it's July 2nd, 2025 and nothing's done, okay. It's time to, heat that seat up a little bit.
Yeah.
But let's see what happens. And now is the time to start adding. We'll see how this deadline goes, how this free agency goes, and then go from there. But we thank you for joining us today. Thanks to Scott Wheeler again, who joined us on the Hooters Hot Wing Hotline. We're back tomorrow at 2:30. We're going to do a full preview of the Four Nations face-off. We'll go team by team, breaking down the rosters, and we'll throw a little poll up during the show and say, who do you think's going to win?
We will be remote tomorrow as well.
Yes.
There's a big snowstorm coming in Chicago.
And I have to come to the city anyway for Taylor Tomlinson, so doesn't matter. But yes, we'll be remote tomorrow. So doesn't matter to you, the viewer. 2:30, we'll be here previewing the Four Nations face-off. Until then, hit that like button on your way out. We'll talk to you then on the CHGO Blackhawks Podcast.
We all silly like the mayor.